Emily had built a quiet life in a suburban home outside Seattle, the kind of place with soft yellow lights at night and a backyard that looked peaceful from the outside. But inside that home she had slowly started feeling something was wrong. It did not happen all at once. It started with small changes in her husband Daniel, who used to be warm, attentive, and easy to talk to, but over the last few weeks he had become distant. Always checking his phone, always saying he was busy at work, always leaving the house earlier and coming back later, and when he did come back, he looked tired but not in a way that made sense to her, more like he was mentally somewhere else. Emily tried not to overthink it because she believed in her marriage, she believed people go through phases, she believed love could get tired and still recover, but deep inside she felt a slow worry growing, and that night was no different at first. Daniel had left early in the morning, saying he had an important meeting in downtown Seattle. He kissed her forehead quickly, something he had not done with warmth in a long time, and left before she could ask any questions. The house stayed quiet all day. Emily tried to keep herself busy, cleaning, cooking, checking her phone again and again even though she knew there would be nothing new. By evening she noticed the silence felt heavier than usual, even the sound of the refrigerator seemed louder, and she found herself thinking about old memories, when Daniel used to come home laughing, when he used to sit with her on the couch and talk about nothing and everything. She missed that version of him deeply, but she also started wondering if that version was gone forever. Around midnight she was still awake, sitting in her bedroom with a small lamp on, scrolling through messages that felt empty, when suddenly she heard a knock at the front door. It was not loud or aggressive, just soft and careful. But in a house like hers at that hour it felt shocking. She froze for a moment, listening closely, thinking maybe she imagined it, but then it came again, a second knock, more certain this time. She stood up slowly, her heart starting to beat faster for reasons she could not explain. She walked down the hallway in silence, each step feeling heavier. She looked through the small side window near the door but saw only darkness and the faint outline of a figure. When she opened the door slightly she was surprised to see Ethan, her stepson, standing there alone in the cold night air. Ethan was a quiet young man in his early 20s, polite but reserved. He had moved between college and part-time work and rarely involved himself in family matters, so seeing him at that hour immediately made Emily feel something serious had happened. His face looked pale, and his eyes were tense as if he had not slept properly. He stood still for a moment as if gathering courage. Then he spoke in a low voice asking if he could come inside. Emily hesitated only for a second before stepping aside because something in his expression told her this was not a casual visit. Once inside he did not sit down immediately. He stood near the door as if unsure whether he even belonged there. His hands were slightly shaking and his breathing was uneven. Emily closed the door behind him and turned on a small light in the living room. She asked him gently what was wrong and why he was here so late. Ethan looked around the room as if checking for someone else, then finally spoke, saying he had been thinking for a long time and could not stay silent anymore. Emily felt her stomach tighten because his tone carried weight. She asked him to sit but he shook his head, still standing. Then he said something about his father, Daniel, and the moment he said that name Emily already felt a change in the air. Ethan paused again like he was afraid of what would happen next. Then he told her that Daniel had not been working late like he said, that he had seen him in places he was not supposed to be during those hours. Emily tried to interrupt, tried to defend Daniel instinctively, saying there must be a mistake, but Ethan insisted quietly that it was not a misunderstanding, that he had seen things more than once and could not ignore it anymore. Emily felt her mind resisting the idea, trying to protect itself from pain, but Ethan's voice stayed steady and serious. He said he did not want to hurt her but she deserved to know the truth. And in that moment Emily realized that whatever was coming next would change everything she believed about her life. She stood there frozen, listening to the sound of her own heartbeat in the silence, not knowing that the night had only just begun to unfold a truth that would break her trust in ways she never imagined. Emily stood in the middle of her living room, feeling like the floor had shifted under her feet. Ethan's words were still hanging in the air, heavy and sharp. and her mind kept trying to reject them. Because what he was saying did not fit the life she believed she was living. She looked at him closely, searching his face for any sign that this was a mistake, but Ethan looked exhausted, not excited, not dramatic, just tired in a way that came from holding something painful for too long. Emily finally spoke in a shaky voice, asking him to repeat what he meant, and Ethan lowered his eyes for a second before saying again that Daniel had not been where he claimed to be, that he had seen him meeting someone during late hours, and that it was not just once. Emily felt a cold wave move through her chest. She tried to laugh it off at first, like her mind was refusing reality, but the sound never came out properly. Instead she asked who it was, hoping there would be a simple explanation, maybe a coworker, maybe something harmless, but Ethan hesitated, and that hesitation was worse than any answer. Emily stepped closer, asking him to be honest, telling him she needed the truth no matter how painful it was. Ethan finally took a deep breath and said the name Laura, and in that second everything inside Emily went silent, because Laura was not just a name, she was someone Emily trusted deeply, someone who had been in her home many times, someone who had shared meals, laughter, and long conversations about life and marriage. Emily felt her legs weaken slightly and she had to hold on to the edge of a chair. She shook her head quickly, saying it could not be true, that Laura would never do something like that. But even as she said it, her voice lacked confidence. Ethan stayed quiet for a moment, then said he wished it was not true either, that he had tried to ignore it but the signs kept repeating. Emily's thoughts started racing. She remembered small moments she had ignored before, Daniel's sudden phone calls outside, his late returns, the way he sometimes smiled at his phone in a way he did not smile at her anymore. And then she remembered Laura's visits becoming more frequent in the last months. Always casual, always friendly, but now those memories felt different, like pieces of a puzzle she had never wanted to complete. Emily asked Ethan how long this had been going on, but Ethan said he did not know exactly, only that he had seen them together more than once in situations that did not feel normal. Emily felt anger rising now, not loud anger, but a deep burning pain mixed with disbelief. She asked Ethan why he did not tell her earlier, and Ethan's expression tightened as he said he was afraid of breaking the family, afraid of his father, and afraid that no one would believe him. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her breathing, but her chest felt tight, like every breath carried weight. When she opened her eyes again, she asked if Daniel knew that Ethan had seen anything, and Ethan shook his head, saying he had been careful not to show it, but he could not stay silent anymore because things were getting worse. Emily felt a wave of confusion now mixed with heartbreak, because she was trying to understand how the life she lived every day could have another hidden version she knew nothing about. She sat down slowly, her hands trembling in her lap, and asked Ethan if he was completely sure, and Ethan nodded firmly this time, saying he would not come to her unless he was certain. The room felt too quiet again, only the soft sound of the clock ticking in the background. Emily's mind kept going back to Laura, remembering her smile, her voice, the way she had once comforted Emily during a difficult time, and now that same memory felt like betrayal. Emily whispered that she could not believe it, and Ethan finally said there was something more, something he had been trying not to say. Emily looked up immediately, fear and expectation mixing in her eyes, and asked what else there could possibly be. Ethan looked conflicted, like he was carrying one last heavy truth. Then he said he believed Daniel and Laura were planning to leave together, not just meeting secretly, but making a decision that would change everything permanently. And those words hit Emily harder than anything before, because it turned the situation from confusion into reality, from suspicion into something final. She felt her world collapse inward, not with noise, but with a deep quiet breaking inside her. She sat still, unable to speak, while Ethan stood nearby watching her carefully, unsure what to do next. And in that silence Emily realized that the life she had trusted might already be ending without her knowing when it truly began to fall apart. Emily sat in silence for a long moment after Ethan's last words. The house felt different now, like even the air had changed, heavier and colder. She could still hear the ticking clock in the background, but everything else felt far away. Her emotions were not coming in waves anymore, they were stacking up quietly, one over another: shock, sadness, anger, disbelief, and something deeper she could not name yet. Ethan stood near the door watching her carefully, unsure if he should stay or leave. Emily finally lifted her head and looked at him, her eyes tired but slowly clearing. She asked him to sit down, and this time he did, slowly and cautiously, like someone walking into fragile ground. Emily took a breath and asked him why he came to her instead of confronting his father. Ethan looked down and said he tried to ignore what he saw for a long time, but it kept repeating, and he could not carry it alone anymore, especially knowing she deserved the truth. Emily nodded slowly, even though it hurt deeply, because part of her understood the weight he had been carrying. There was a short silence again, but this time it was not suffocating, it was just heavy with reality. Emily finally stood up and walked to the window, looking outside at the quiet street, trying to steady her thoughts. She realized something important in that moment. She could not control what Daniel had done, and she could not change Laura's choices, but she could decide what to do next with her own life. That thought gave her a small sense of strength, even in the middle of pain. She turned back to Ethan and spoke calmly, telling him that he did the right thing by telling her. Ethan looked relieved but still worried, as if he was afraid of what would happen next. Emily assured him again, saying he was not responsible for the situation between the adults, and he should not carry guilt for it. Ethan nodded slowly, and for the first time that night his shoulders relaxed slightly. Emily sat back down and asked him if Daniel had said anything directly about leaving. Ethan hesitated but said he had overheard parts of conversations that sounded like plans, talks about starting over somewhere else, far from here. Emily closed her eyes for a second, absorbing the finality of it. There was no misunderstanding left now, only confirmation. She felt a sharp pain in her chest but forced herself to stay calm. She knew breaking down would not help her think clearly. She asked Ethan one more question. If he thought Laura knew about her, about their family. Ethan said he believed she did, and that made the betrayal feel even deeper, because it was not ignorance, it was choice. Emily leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling for a moment, then slowly said she was not going to beg anyone to stay. Ethan looked surprised at her tone, as if he expected tears or anger, but instead there was calm determination forming in her voice. She said if Daniel wanted to leave, he would have to say it himself, and she would not chase a man who had already chosen another path. Ethan stayed quiet, respecting her words. Emily then stood again and walked toward the hallway, as if grounding herself physically. She took a deep breath and told Ethan he should go rest, that she would be fine, though she was not fully sure what fine meant anymore. Ethan hesitated before leaving, and before he stepped out he asked if she would be okay. Emily gave a small tired smile and said she would be, even if it took time. Ethan nodded and finally left the house quietly, closing the door behind him, and the moment he was gone the house felt emptier than before, but also clearer, like a fog had started lifting. Emily stood alone in the living room, listening to the silence, and instead of collapsing into despair, she slowly started making a decision inside herself. She would not confront everything in anger, she would not rush into chaos, she would first understand the truth fully, and then she would protect her own dignity, her own peace, and her own future. She walked to the table and sat down, picking up her phone, looking at Daniel's name on the screen, but she did not call him. She simply set the phone down again, because for the first time she understood that silence could also be a form of strength. Outside, the night remained quiet, but inside Emily something had changed permanently. She was still hurt, still shocked, but no longer completely lost, because now she knew the truth, and once the truth is known, even the deepest betrayal cannot keep a person in the same place forever.